Hermitage, red 2008. So 2008, we're on number 8, 2008 Hermitage. So again, I'm going to use my trusty little, sorry I didn't bring a map of the hillside of Hermitage, but so anyway, so the hillside of Hermitage, sorry if you know all this, but just so for those of you who don't know, when the glaciers came through, what makes Hermitage really Hermitage is thanks to the glaciers. When the glaciers came through, they ripped through, leaving the Rhone Valley where the Rhone River runs. So the Rhone River runs obviously from north to south, and they ripped open this passageway, exposing this hillside of Hermitage. If you ever are in Hermitage and come to the top of the hill, you'll see that the Rhone River runs from north to south here, and right at Hermitage runs west to east, and then runs south again. By doing that, they've exposed the hillside of Hermitage. It's east-facing, south-facing, and west-facing. So it gets the sun in the morning, noon, and the last sun of the day. Whereas if you are on this side and you look at Hermitage, at 4 o'clock in a January day, Hermitage is still in the sun. Saint Joseph is already in the shade. So, and whenever I'm driving with Sean Louis, he's always like, "Look, see, it's still in the sun." I'm like, "I know, you told me that." Not only has it exposed Hermitage to the sun, it also left a geological patchwork on this hillside that is absolutely incredible. Saint Joseph is granite, like we've talked about often, but Hermitage is a multitude of different soils. So we have 7 different soil types for our Hermitage. That is quite fortunate we're fortunate to have that many different types of soil. So starting farthest west for us is our largest parcel, which is called Les Bessards. It's the first parcel that Jean-Louis' great-grandfather bought in the 1800s. It's the steepest. It's the parcel, if you've seen the pictures of Hermitage or been there, it's the parcel that sits directly underneath the chapelle, the little chapel it goes all the way down. And that parcel is actually granite from the other side. So when the glaciers came through, when they ripped this passage open, this part of the hill, part of it, got stuck onto Hermitage. And so that is our Bessard parcel. That is the backbone for our parcel. That's what makes our Hermitage different than other Hermitage, because of that granite. Whereas if you had more mayal, for example, Javelais has more mayal, and that is rolled river stones. So that has more jammy, almost Chateauneuf-like quality to it, whereas we have more Burgundian quality because we have that tight Bessard tannins.
How much is Bessard?
Colder. How many hectares?
I don't know how much of the, like, is there, do you know, percentage of
there's no recipe for it every year. It just depends on, it's almost like I said, like a chef, because some years, if it's very tight tannins, you don't want to put too much of it in, because then you have nothing but bones and no flesh. So it's always based on blending it with your mouth and your nose. It's really by tasting it. So it's never 65% this, 20% that. It's never just a set thing every year. So after Bessard, we move on to the Mayenne. So we do have a parcel in the Mayenne, so it's the rolled river stone. So it brings that jamminess up to Hermitage. Then just moving along is Les Baumes, and Les Baumes is pudding stone, and that is also something that's brought by the glacier. It's when the glacier Poudin in French, but it is basically pebbles that are, by the sheer force of the glacier coming through, crushed all of these pebbles together. It looks like concrete, basically, with a bunch of pebbles in it. But that really gives the middle of the wine. It gives that velvety texture. It's more the cello instead of as Bessard would be more of a violin, and Baume would be more of a cello. Just underneath Baumes, it's Pellia. Pellia is our monopole vineyard, and that is clay and sand, and that brings a lot of the finesse to the wine. Then wrapping up behind Pelliard, there's l'Hermite, and l'Hermite is right on the top, and that's granite, rolled river stones, clay, and l'os. And l'os is brought by the winds. So if you don't work your soil, that top layer just disappears. So it's very important to work with a plow and with a horse to incorporate that in. But it brings a lot of spice to the wine. Like Victor said, that probably for us the most important thing is, it's sweet because people say, oh, I drank a Chave last night. And not to correct anybody, but you didn't drink a Chave, you drank an Hermitage. Because the hill has been there before us, the hill will be there hopefully after us, and we are just for the moment tenders of the vine. So that's exactly, like he said, our name is always smaller than the hillside and the appellation. So really in the philosophy of my husband's family, it is, he sees Hermitage as a whole hill. There are people who do single vineyard Hermitage. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not the way that we do it, because we feel that it's a patchwork, and you really need to use that patchwork to really, it's like a chef who has one ingredient or 7 ingredients, and to really work with that, to bring things in and help express the thing, to help express the soil. It's funny because when people talk about grape and Syrah, and Jean always says, but the grape is just a vector for the soil. So it's really more important to talk about the soil than the grape.
So have you ever had to add any, sorry, did you ever add any additives to, or additional stuff into the soil to bring the soil back from any kind of
Well, we always do compost, things like that, but really, no, we try not to. Just enough compost. They always checks the soil just to make sure that we are okay, but if we have to add something, it's always organic.
Yeah.
So 2008 is, sorry, we're still in 2008, I'm sorry, I'm chatting away about Hermitage, but, so 2008 is really a beautiful vintage. 2008 is really a beautiful vintage. I think personally, it reminds me quite a bit of 91.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's Rise's favorite.
Really?
91 is just, I just took it. 91 Chave is just Jesus in a bottle.
It is, you know what, actually, I'll tell you a little secret about 91. 91 is the doghouse wine for me, because anytime Jean-Louis in trouble, he knows it's my favorite, so there's a magical bottle of 91 that appears. So,
it's the best wine, I've had the 61 is a legendary wine. I think the 91 is just under the radar, it's pretty beautiful.
Right,
it's no longer.
No, absolutely. Well, and the thing is 91 followed the heels of 90, and 90 was the big vintage, touted, blah blah blah, which is great. That's, you know what? Some people really like that vintage, and that's wonderful, and everyone has their own taste. I personally love 91 because.
Did they make an Hermitage in 91?
Yes. Because of the fact that it's more classical. You know, you either have a vintage based on the sun or based on the soil. And 90 is based on the sun, the expression of the sun, the fruit in the sun. And 91 is based on the fruit and the soil. So you really have more of the classical lines of Hermitage. Same thing in 08. You had a 2007, which we'll see, which is much more lush, concentrated, and then you have 08, which is all in the purity and the classical lines of Hermitage. So.
Do you think the 08 is as ripe?
Is 91?
Is the 91 one?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.